What's up, everybody? It's your boy, GrandpaBucky. I don't know why I said it's your boy. I'm old as shit. But here's the key. I want to be super transparent so that anything that I say in future videos, you can look at where I am politically, where I am on the political spectrum. I'm going to take two tests during this little session. First is the political compass test, so that you will know how authoritarian versus how liberal and how left versus right I am. So you'll get an idea from that. But then I'm also going to take, I've never done this one before. This Pew Research Center has a political typology quiz, where apparently there's 9 political typology groups. So I've always had an issue with how this one is laid out, because there's very specific things where it can be, like, if you just have views that are positive of police, you get more points in authoritarian, even though you're like, I don't want them to crack skulls, I just want them to arrest criminals. So we're going to go through both of these tests. We're going to start with the one that's more generic, and then we're going to go over to the other one. But like I said, I just want everyone to be able to view this, because on Twitter, of course, I started VTube stuff right whenever a major political upheaval and political issues are occurring, and it's hard not to comment on them. But, it's just one of those cases that we're going to have a quick run through of these, and we're going to get started right now. So 6 pages of, it looks like about 6 questions, maybe a little more, maybe a little less on each page. So we're going to go through them. I'm going to explain reasons quickly on each of them. So first question: if economic globalization is inevitable, it should primarily serve humanity rather than the interests of transnational corporations. So with that, I say I agree, because I am against corporations controlling things, but I don't strongly agree, because corporations aren't inherently evil. There's historical examples of corporations that have done great things for humanity. There's opposites of Nestle. You know what I'm saying? Nestle is, I'm going to take advantage of your groundwater. I'm going to keep you from being able to survive. They're horrible, horrible people. But there's also groups that are corporations that have done wonderful things, where they've made things better wherever they are. So transnational corporations aren't necessarily against humanity. They could serve alongside humanity, but humanity is individuals. We should exist above the levels of corporations. You know what I mean? I'd always support my country, whether it was right or wrong. Disagree. I put a slight disagree, because America is the best country on the planet. We have the most freedoms. We have the most ability to do what we want. We have the most economic flexibility. You can go from being in poverty to being rich. My family, in 2 generations, went from my grandpa barely being able to eat, like his family did not have dinner every night, to my family, me specifically, my family, my kids never have hunger. They have more toys than they can imagine, and me and my wife hate that fact, because of the fact that they are being spoiled by their grandparents and aunts and uncles. But whenever I grew up, I got 2-3 toys in a year. I got a toy for my birthday, and then two or three toys at Christmas time. And they were not super expensive toys. I didn't get the ability to have Furbies and all the stuff that was expensive back then. So, I was a modestly raised kid. My parents, though, didn't have a lot. So, America is the best country, but if it does something that's wrong, I don't support that. Whenever it had slavery, I have always said that was wrong. I understand why the founders did it, because in order to actually get the 13 colonies so that they would have enough people to fight the British and get their freedom, they had to support the slavery in the Constitution. But they weren't saying we're going to add slavery. They were saying, okay, well, we can't get rid of slavery and become colonies. Because there were founders that wanted to get rid of slavery from day one. But in order to get enough people, they had to agree to it. Sometimes you agree to allow something to continue even though you don't agree with it, because it will allow you to get rid of things you do agree on. You know, like they came to a consensus across groups, and that was that. But my point is, I can say when America has done wrong. The Trail of Tears was wrong. Slavery was wrong. The concentration camps of Japanese Americans was wrong. It's not hard to say when we've done wrong. Period. No one chooses their country of birth, so it's foolish to be proud of it. That's a disagree because of one reason. You don't get to choose the country of your birth, but you can definitely be proud whenever you got lucky that you were in a country that is good. It's foolish to be proud of it without question. That part is foolish, but it's not foolish to be proud of it. America has freedom and allows people to move up and down the class system. If you have a good idea, if you write a good book, if you make a good video game, if you do all sorts of things, you can completely change your lifestyle. It's too rigid to say that it's foolish to be proud of it. No, you can be proud of it if there's something to be proud about. And I'm proud of America. So I strongly disagree with that. If it had that qualifier with like unconditionally proud of it, then I would agree. Our race has many superior qualities compared to other races. Strongly disagree. There's no inherent qualities of any race. There's none. Black people, white people, Indians, Japanese, Koreans, Middle Easterners. There's nothing that is in our race that makes us act a way. We may have different cultural things, you know. In the Middle East, it's more common to do things that aren't in Western culture. In Eastern culture, like China and Japan and Korea's and all those, there's other standards and consistencies. In India, the country of India, it's common for them to just throw trash over walls or throw it in the woods or do things like that. While in the West, that is an absolutely unheard of thing. That is not something that is genetic, it's something that is cultural. And you can put a million reasons why. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. I'm only going to put a slight agreement on that because of the fact that you can align with someone in order to achieve a goal without completely getting on their side. You know what I mean? Like I said with the founding fathers. They said, hey, you also hate the British. We don't agree on slavery, but we do agree on getting rid of the British. So let's at least work on that together, and then we can handle the stuff we disagree on later. So you can do that. Military action that defies international law is sometimes justified. Oh, that's a hard one. That's a hard one. I'm between agree and disagree. So I'm on the agree side because international law is international law, and even if we don't agree with it, we should follow it. But I am also seeing international law be used to protect bad people from punishment. I have seen that. It is more and more common, especially when you allow China and Russia to join those different international agencies. They can then influence law that can protect them. And so I agree because law is law, and we should always follow what the law says, but we should try to change it. So even if it was justified, I don't think it should be done necessarily, if that makes sense. There is now a worrying fusion of information and entertainment. I agree with that. I strongly agree with that, actually. Information and entertainment, the reason I strongly agree that it is worrying is because, like we saw on the Jimmy Kimmel thing just a week ago, it has... So it was complete blatant misinformation. It had been said from multiple sources that the shooter of Charlie Kirk was left-leaning. Multiple sources said that. And then Jimmy Kimmel came on and said that the MAGA crowd is trying to say that he's not one of theirs. When literally we had like 3 sources saying he was left-leaning, he was Antifa aligned, he was LGBT aligned. None of these things are right-leaning. None of them. And so that type of misinformation was tied to the idea of, oh, but I'm a comedian making jokes on my late night program, in order to give him a shield of that misinformation. So I'm not worried about information and entertainment going together. There's tons of YouTube videos I watch that are taking information and putting it into an entertaining way for you to ingest it. But whenever it allows the protection of someone spouting something that is completely untrue, that's where it's worrying. So I guess I'm going to put agree, not strongly agree, because it's a little worrying when it's abused, but it's not super worrying when it's used for good things, like Kurzgesagt or things like that are using it for an informational, educational purpose. Next group. I'm going to try to go a little faster now. People are ultimately divided more by class than by nationality. I have a disagreement with that, because in America we do have that division by class. I don't think it's as much as people think. The richest of the rich, yeah, they've got a ton of money and they can do whatever they want. But I see a lot of poor people that are doing all right. They're living life. They have food. They have electricity. They have a car that works. A lot of people fit a lot of positive things. You know what I mean? And so I don't think that that's so much. But nationality can make a huge difference in how we are viewing the world. There are Muslims in America that want Sharia law, which would throw LGBTs off, that would throw them off rooftops or hang them or kill them. They would do honor killings to kill their kids if they've dishonored them. Things like that are a huge divide between them and Native Americans versus the rich and the poor. Rich and poor can agree on stuff in the United States, but nationalities can have a huge disagreement and a complete misalignment. So I disagree with that because of that reason. Controlling inflation is more important than controlling unemployment. I think that's agree, because inflation will make it even more difficult for those that are unemployed to live. Because we have safety net programs, and whether those safety net programs should be limited or not is a discussion between people. But if inflation goes skyrocketing, the unemployment that the people get is not going to cover them. They're going to struggle to eat. They're going to struggle to afford rent. They're going to struggle to do everything. And while I think that you should be on unemployment as short as possible, inflation going through the roof is going to crater the entire economy and make unemployment even worse. So I think that inflation is the higher importance of these two. Because corporations cannot be trusted to voluntarily protect the environment, they require regulation. I agree slightly. Regulation is important to prevent companies from doing wild things like just dumping nuclear waste into a river or a lake or things like that. But you do not want to over-regulate, because that will cause the economy to get so much more expensive. It will reduce competition. It will make it where just issues come from the woodwork whenever you over-regulate. Regulation is never a fully supported, or it's never an unquestioned support. That's what I mean to say. There's always the point of, is this regulation actually going to help? What's it going to hurt? Because the people that support regulations are the major companies. You know why? Because they can afford those, and it will put a barrier for any competition. And competition drives up salaries, it drives down prices, and it helps get more jobs. That is a fact. You cannot disagree with that. The gas wars, go look it up. It'll give you a great idea of how competition allows us to get lower cost of living. Fantastic example. From each according to his ability to each according to his need is a fundamentally good idea. So I agree with this slightly because it's hard. I'm really like right in the middle between these because there's fundamental goodness to the idea of giving people things according to their need, but the problem is it's so corruptible. But this is asking about a fundamentally good idea. I disagree. I'm going to put it on the disagree side because it's just too easy to corrupt. Anytime that type of stuff happens, it's too easy to corrupt. The freer the market, the freer the people. Agree. Actually, strongly agree. Because the freer the market, the freer the people means that you can get competition. If this coffee shop is bigoted in some way, there's another coffee shop right next door that can, do whatever. Free economies allow us to do more with our lives. That's the way I see it as a generality. It's a sad reflection on our society that something as basic as drinking water is now bottled, branded consumer product. I agree. It shouldn't be, so at least it shouldn't be an expensive branded consumer product. But it is anything that's able to be marketed is nowadays. Land shouldn't be a commodity to be bought and sold. Strongly disagree. How land is initially possessed is a completely different thing, but you should have the right to get your own private space. You have the right to privacy. You have the right to space. You have the right to your own domain and your own domicile. So I strongly disagree that it shouldn't be a commodity. Because, farmers have to know that they can protect the farmland that they are farming. You have to know that you can protect the home that you live in. All that stuff comes with it being bought and sold. It is not something that can be justified if it is a public space and is not your own land. It is regrettable that many personal fortunes are made by people who simply manipulate money and contribute nothing to society. I agree with that. Stock market manipulation folks can suck a D. That's how that is. Protectionism is sometimes necessary in trade. I agree. Sometimes you do have to do that. There's not a lot to say. You just got to do that. Sometimes you have to put things in place that will protect your trades. And social responsibility of holy cow. Let me just rewind that. The only social responsibility of a company should be to deliver a profit to its shareholders. Disagree. As a Christian, we are responsible for the world and each other. As a Christian. It is not something the government should be taking care of as much as people should be taking care of it. Shareholders' profitability is important, but that should not come at the cost of your employees. It should not come at the cost of environmental things. Those things should be secondary. Okay? The rich are too highly taxed. I think the rich are currently taxed at like 60% in the highest bracket. I'm between agree and disagree because I disagree because it's, they've got a ton of money. They're still doing well. But I also agree because a lot of research has shown that whenever these people with a lot of money have a lot of money, that money gets used for things that actually help the economy more often than not. That's why their net worth is usually what people look at. Because it's not actually how much money they have in the bank or whatnot. It's based on the properties they have, the stocks they hold, the companies they own, things like that. So with that, it is... I agree that they're too highly taxed because I know people are going to say, oh, trickle-down economics doesn't work. It kind of does, though. Every single business owner that I know has put money into hiring additional people, or has put money into opening new locations, or has put money into a second business. I know none of them that have just sat on it. And I know a half a dozen to a dozen business owners that have been quite successful. So, yeah, I'm sorry to tell you this, it does work. Maybe not every time, but a lot of well-off people put money into additional jobs and locations and things like that. So, those with the ability to pay should have access to higher standards of medical care. This is how medical research works. You have medical research that goes on, and then people that have more money are able to pay for those experimental treatments and things like that. And then once it's established, it becomes more affordable for people. That's how it has always worked. I don't think that there should ever be something that is kept specifically for people of well-off means, but that's a part of the thing. If you have a skill set as a doctor or as a hospital to do something that is high skill sets, it's up to you to determine how much you're going to charge for it. It is not your right as a person to be able to say, well, I can't afford that, you have to do it for me. That's called slavery. That's called slavery. Forcing people to work for you is slavery. Literally. So I agree with that. I don't have a strong agree because, like I said, I don't think that anything should ever be fully locked forever that way, but I think that the markets have ways of handling that. Governments should penalize businesses that mislead the public. Strongly agree. You can't con people and call yourself a business and get away with it. A genuine free market requires restrictions on the ability of predator manipulators to create monopolies. Strongly agree. Free market, I am a free market person up to the point that it starts hurting consumers. Free market means you should have less regulations, you should have less things like that. You can offer tax incentives for hitting specific, like, environmental impact reductions and things like that. But to fully require things is going to... It messes with the free market. It reduces competition, which raises prices, which raises cost of living, which causes people to not be able to afford to live, which causes people to be homeless, which... Everything stems from raising cost of living in my worldview. So, creating monopolies allows people to then raise prices on things. It allows people to not take care of employees. It allows people to force people out of their market space. And that is bad. So, all right. Page 3. Abortion when the life's woman is not threatened should always be illegal. I must put an agree on this. I'm going to give a little bit of whatever on this. So, as a Christian, and as someone who grew up in the 90s where it was explained life begins at conception, in every single science class and biology class I ever took, it has been agreed that life begins at conception since the 90s. I think that killing a baby is just wrong. It's a unique set of DNA from the start. Period. That was scientific consensus forever. Literally forever. I think that when the woman's life is not threatened, it should be allowed to continue. But if the woman's life is threatened, I feel like everything should be done possible to save the baby. It shouldn't be just an abortion, because the abortion is going in with the intention to kill the baby. I think that it should never be the intention to kill the baby, personally, as a Christian that thinks that it's atrocious to murder people that are innocent. I mean, it's not murder if you're putting someone to death for murder. But that being said, for all you pro-choicers out there, if you chose to agree with us that only rape, incest, and life of the mother were acceptable reasons, but rape and incest requires a police report. In other words, I don't want someone just going in and being like, oh yeah, I'm going to just say that it's a rape. I want an actual police investigation type of situation where you provide when it happened, where it happened, who you went home with, and that person can be investigated properly. Once that is in place, because I think that rapists should be, at the very least, neutered, if not fully castrated. Full eunuch treatment for men that rape, so that they can't do it again. I may even go as far as the death penalty for that, because once you take someone's like peace of mind from their bodily autonomy of this is my body, I say yes or no. Once that is breached, that person is scarred forever. I've known people that have been raped, and it's not something they like to think about. But if that was able to be agreed upon, I would agree to the lesser of evils, because it's like 98% of abortions at Planned Parenthood are no reason given. They don't want to tell you why. They aren't saying that they were raped. They aren't saying that it was incest. They aren't saying that it was even economic issues. They are just saying, I just want to get rid of it. I'd agree to the 2% of the abortions continuing to stop the 98%. All authority should be questioned. Disagree. There's basic authorities that we don't need to question. You know, if there's an expansion of authority, it should be questioned. If there's a gross overstepping of our constitutional rights, it should be questioned. But not all authority. Because they put that qualifier, all, I disagree. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Disagree, but also agree. So it's kind of one of those cases. Again, I'm towards the middle of this. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth leaves the world blind. Is an eye for an eye leaves the world blind, I think is the phrase. But point is, I agree because you have to punish people, but I disagree because it doesn't necessarily have to be the same way. Murder should result in the death penalty. If you have so little value for human life, you should not be trusted around human lives. But other things, you need to, it's like if someone stole from you, you shouldn't steal from them. That kind of thing is not acceptable. So I'm going to put it on the disagree side, but there's that caveat. Taxpayers should not be expected to prop up any theaters or museums that cannot survive on a commercial basis. I disagree because museums, yes, those should get taxpayer dollars to help support them because they put forward historical knowledge, art knowledge, fine things like that. Theaters, though, your job is to put on a entertaining show. It's good that theaters exist and thrive, but it is still up to you to make something entertaining. Movie theaters are just the evolution of theaters. They have to support themselves. Theaters should have to support themselves. That's my point on it. Schools should not make classroom attendance compulsory. Disagree. It is important to get education. That's the end of that. There's nothing else. All people have their rights, but it is better for all of us that different sorts of people should keep to their own kind. I disagree. If you can get people to drop those cultural differences and melting pot into American culture, you will see an improvement in American culture. The problem right now is black culture is being isolated from white culture. I don't think there really is a white culture, honestly. It's just kind of, white culture is just the old school American system where it's like, oh yeah, you can do anything. You can do this, you can do that. Train yourself, learn. That's America, or that's white culture, I guess. But white culture is so, I mean, look at the far left versus the far right. You got a whole spectrum for white people culture. But Indian culture is different, and if you got them to melt into American style, that would be different. So I disagree. I think that people need to be more amalgamated together and turned into a singular American, at least in America, a single American way of life whenever you immigrate here from somewhere else, or if you're born here and are of a specific race or a specific economic class. You should try to mingle across all of these things. I hate seeing all of these drives to segregate blacks from whites in colleges, which is disgusting to me. Good parents sometimes have to spank their children. Agree. Because sometimes kids don't respond to grounding. Sometimes kids don't respond to timeouts. Sometimes kids don't respond to toys being taken away. Sometimes they only have a response from a swat on the butt. You should not beat your children. No. But you should be able to spank them whenever they are acting up. It gave the Gen X is my favorite generation. It really is. They have sarcasm. They have a little bit of wit to them. They have toughness. They know how to survive on their own. And they're able to go off of that. That was lost more and more. Like, the less spanking was going on, the more I can do what I want attitude has come out in these generations. And I'm not for it. I think that sometimes kids need to learn, you do something bad, you're going to get hit. Not like I'm going to make you bruised. I want to clarify that. You do not bruise or break your kid with a spanking. You give them a firm swatting to say, no, that's unacceptable. If you see your kid punch another kid, you give them a spanking and say, no, we don't do that. I'm going to spank you to reinforce this idea that next time you think of hitting another kid, you know you're about to get grounded, you know you're about to get spanked, and it's not going to be accepted in this household. That's the key. It's natural for children to keep some secrets from their parents. It's natural, yes. Do I think that you as a parent should be someone that's so approachable from your children that they're not afraid to tell you everything? Yeah. But I also know that whenever I was a kid, I accidentally broke someone's window on their car whenever a BB gun shot bounced off a piece of concrete on the ground and bounced up and hit their window. I kept that a secret because I was terrified of getting in a ton of trouble. And as an adult, I'm like, oh man, I can't imagine going out to your car one day and being like, what happened to my window? And so, yeah, there was that. So, yeah. Possessing marijuana for personal use should not be a criminal offense. I agree. Marijuana is where I draw the line, though. I don't... Okay, marijuana and no, not mushrooms. I'm on the fence about mushrooms because anything that's hallucinogenic can cause someone to eat faces off of people or do things like that. But marijuana, I don't really know of marijuana, at least normal marijuanas, that cause people to hallucinate. And as such, I think that it should be treated the same as cigarettes. So enjoy your stuff, but at least where I live, you can't smoke in public, and you shouldn't be able to do marijuana in public either. So, yeah. Marijuana specifically, personal use should not be a criminal offense. The prime function of schooling should be to equip the future generation to find jobs. I agree. You should be able to find a job when you're done. I also think that it should teach you how to survive on your own as well, but that is that. People with serious inheritable disabilities should not be allowed to reproduce. Disagree. Strongly disagree. Your value does not change, in my eyes, based on your disabilities. If you are full Down syndrome, you are just as precious to me as someone who is genius level. If you are autistic, you matter just as much as someone who is normal. Being autistic doesn't necessarily make you abnormal, because people have different quirks about them. That's just a fact of life. I don't treat any person like they're different from me. Literally, I had a friend for years growing up. Years that was mentally disabled. He was a great friend. He loved hugs, I'll tell you that. The people, I'm just going to take a brief moment. The people that treated him the worst were the people that voted Democrat and said how important it was in later years to not use the word retard. And they're the ones that treated him, a person with a learning disability, the worst. They made fun of him, they laughed at him, they did things like that, and it was disgusting to me. The most important thing for children to learn is to accept discipline. I don't think it's the most important thing, so I'm going to put disagree. See, they put these qualifiers. This is what I hate about these tests. They put qualifiers that can completely change your answer. I disagree. The most important thing a child can learn is how to take care of themselves, how to solve problems for themselves, and how to sustain themselves for whenever they're an adult. That's the most important thing. Learning to accept discipline and responsibility is also a part of that, though. It is just a lower part of it. It's like Tier A is learning to take care of yourself. Tier B has discipline and responsibility in it, because those are very, very important. There are no savage and civilized people. There are only different cultures. Strongly disagree. The Middle East is absolutely savage. They kill their own kids because they've dishonored them. They molest animals, they molest kids, and they still participate in slavery in some areas. Those are savage to me. I do not respect those cultures. If you are a person from that culture, but you have more Western style thoughts of this is gross and I don't like it, I don't hold any of it against you because you don't agree with it. But there are definitely savage people in the world still. And to say that there aren't is absolute ignorance. I'm not, and like I said, I'm not against someone who is Middle Eastern. I'm against the ideas that Middle Eastern culture has. There are definitely savage cultural values of the Middle East. But that doesn't mean I'm going to see a Middle Easterner and immediately say, you're disgusting. I don't judge someone based on their skin or where they're from. I judge based on their view of the world, what they see as acceptable. That's what I see. Those who are able to work and refuse the opportunity should not expect society's support. Strongly agree. If you are able to work, but you are refusing to work, you should get nothing. The end. The end. When you are troubled, it's better not to think about it, but to keep busy with more cheerful things. I agree. Mentality is a big part of getting through tough spots. That's just my view of the world, period. First generation immigrants can never fully integrate with their new country. Strongly disagree. There are many examples of historical first generation immigrants that fully integrated. My family did it whenever they came from Austria. My great-grandmother immigrated from Austria. She was an orphan. She got sent over here to live with family that was over here. She fully integrated. The majority of my other family, though, was here from the Revolution onward. So we kind of made the country at that point. But yeah, so what's good for the most successful corporations is always ultimately good for all of us. Disagree. Sometimes it is good for all of us because sometimes successful corporations are able to figure out a way to make things cheaper, and then that savings gets passed on. But it's not always good, because what's good for successful corporations is also over-regulation, which is bad for all of us, because then they have no reason to drop their prices because they're the only ones in town. So being a monopoly is an example of where it's not good for us, but is good for a corporation, and competitive companies finding technologies and ways to make things cheaper and then sell cheaper in order to get more market share is good for us because it lets us do things for less money. No broadcasting institution, however independent its content, should receive public funding. I agree on this. I don't think that PBS should get public funding. I don't think that NPR should get public funding. I think that these things should be fully... Because the problem is that everything that gets public funding has been manipulated by one side or the other at some point. And that's not what it's... If it could have stayed purely neutral, I would have said I disagree that they should get it. But I've seen examples of it being corrupted just in my lifetime. Our civil liberties are being excessively curbed in the name of counterterrorism. I do agree. Being able to look into people's phones is just not acceptable. There's becoming a higher and higher surveillance state. I used to have this mindset of, well, if you're not really doing anything, we shouldn't be concerned about it. But I have seen it used and abused in incorrect ways in just the last 5 years. Since COVID started, I've seen it abused. A significant advantage of a one-party state is that it avoids all the arguments that delays... I think that's a huge disadvantage of it, personally. We are set up to be slow to change, specifically so that we don't have wild swings in policy, specifically so that we don't have wild swings in law, specifically so that we don't have issues coming up that would come up from a single-party state. Imagine if it was a single-party state and America suddenly said, oh yeah, if you are someone who is pro-choice, you now get sent to the gulags. That's not good. Pro-choice doesn't make you villainous. I don't agree with it, but it doesn't make you evil. If you are someone that is like, no, I love killing babies, that's evil. But there's people, one of my best friends doesn't see it as a baby until later, while I see it as a baby earlier. It doesn't make her evil. It just means we have a disagreement. And it's possible to talk through ideas and convey that to the other side. But if you have a single-party state, they can just arrest everyone that disagrees with them, and there's no one to push back on it. They can make laws change overnight, and that's not acceptable. They can also make it where you are basically slaves to the government in an instant. Like, you do not want a single-party state ever. Ever. Look at anywhere in the United States that has had only a single party ruling it for more than, we'll say 20 years, and tell me how those areas are doing. Although the electronic age makes official surveillance easier, only wrongdoers need be worried. I just talked about this. I used to have that thought, but I've seen it abused. The death penalty should be an option for the most serious crimes. Strongly agree. You know why? Because people don't want to die. So that curbs some crime already. But then on top of that, if you just kill the people that are murderers and rapists and whatnot, it's less people that have a chance to somehow get back out and murder or rape again. That's just how it is. And pedophiles should be wood chippered. I'm team wood chipper on that full on. You know why? Because you took the innocence of a kid on top of the, like, raping an adult is already atrocious. Doing it to a kid is unforgivable. Absolutely unforgivable. I am Team Woodchipper on that. In a civilized society, one must always have people above to be obeyed and people below to be commanded. Okay. So I say disagree because look at how it was in like the Wild West whenever people were just kind of doing whatever. But at the same time... Okay, so I'm going to put disagree because of one specific thing. If it said, in a civilized society, one must always have someone above to be obeyed, I would say yeah, I agree with it. Because you have to have some sort of, like, even in the Old West, there were sheriffs that you had to listen to. Hey, you're breaking the law. Stop. That should be obeyed. But people below to be commanded, it is up to people what they are going to do. The obeyed part comes from law enforcement, comes from whatever, but no one should be commanded. No one should be forced to do something. They shouldn't necessarily, like, specifically in case someone points out the fact that I said that anyone that's capable of working but is refusing to work should not get any help, that they might go, that's making people do something. Well, I'm sorry, Tweedledee, but no, that's just saying we're not going to give you some sort of social safety net that is there for people who are down on their luck when you're just refusing to do something. Abstract art that doesn't represent anything shouldn't be considered art at all. I agree. If you make a blue damn square and put 2 lines across it or duct tape a banana to a wall, that's not art. People that actually put skill and effort and practice into it, that's art. Art is art. People who make stupid abstract stuff that, well, let me clarify. There are abstract things that are art. Because, you know, abstract art is a style that you can see images in and whatnot. I'm talking specifically about those ones that are just like a blue square or some stupid shit like that. Those ones are not art. But I'm treating the doesn't represent anything as the blue square and the banana on the wall. In criminal justice, punishment should be more important than rehabilitation. I agree. You did something wrong. It's time to pay for your crime. I think rehabilitation should occur when possible and as much as possible, but punishment should be the primary thing. Criminals can buy TVs and cigarettes and shit like that in their prisons. If you can get access to all the luxuries of the outside world, except for like private showers and stuff, but if you can get access to TV and all that stuff, it becomes less of a punishment. It becomes less of a place that people want to avoid going back to. And that's what it really comes down to. It is a waste of time to try and rehabilitate criminals. That point I strongly disagree. Like I said, it should be a part of it, but I think that punishment is more important. Especially since there's so much relapsing of criminals. Like, so much. I don't think that you should be out after a single strike for committing a crime, but so many criminals well, maybe it's not the same crime, but they do more crimes and they end up back. The business person and the manufacturer are more important than the writer and the artist. Okay, so I'm putting agree because I lean towards agree. Because the writer and the artist are fantastic and they are good for society in the fact that they inspire and they put forth entertainment and stuff like that. But if all the artists and all the writerists left the world, there were none left, yeah, we would have an uninspired world, but if the business person and the manufacturers disappeared, we would have nothing. You wouldn't have notebooks, you wouldn't have computers, you wouldn't have your TVs, you wouldn't have any physical thing that you see would be gone. Manufacturers, the business person, that is completely negligent. Business person could disappear along with writer and artist, and the world would continue working. But if you take manufacturer away, nothing would exist. You wouldn't have glass, you wouldn't have glassware, you wouldn't have silverware, you wouldn't have anything. Manufacturers are the most important of these four groups by a mile. Mothers may have careers, but their first duty is to be homemakers. I disagree. While I would love to have mothers be home raising kids and being able to do that, we live in a world where women were talked into joining the workforce, which doubled the amount of income in a house, which then allowed businesses and builders of homes as well to double over time, double or triple the price of things, because now there's more income in a house. This is classic economics, supply and demand. Those charts cross. You raise the price of something until people stop buying it as much, and then you lower the price back down. There's a certain point in that chart where you maximize profits, and it is quality versus price. If people can get 16 things that are cheap and break, and that gives them more time and or use than one thing that costs 20 times as much, they'll get the 16 cheap ones over the one expensive one. So it's always a thing that economies are trying to balance out, how expensive they can make things versus how cheap they can make things to get the maximum profit. And so we live in a world that has already adjusted to two incomes in basically every home, and as such, you can't just stop having two incomes, not unless the one income is massive. Almost all politicians promise economic growth, but we should heed the warnings of climate science that growth is detrimental to our efforts to curb global warming. I disagree. This is my hot take. Yeah, you can listen to the warnings of climate scientists, but I've seen, I can't even think of the guy's name. He's a former Greenpeace, he was one of the founding members of Greenpeace. He's an environmental science person. And he said that, the warmth that they're projecting over the next 100 years would actually result in a more fertile, more capable world for humanity. Not a detriment. It wouldn't destroy everything. It may shift where agriculture occurs, but it would not destroy the world. Meanwhile, at the same time, you don't want to just abuse the world. Like I said, as a Christian, I see it as we are responsible for caretaking the world that we were given. Meanwhile, I also want to make the point of this. While I think that the climate science stuff is exaggerated, we aren't as big of an impact as climate scientists like to believe. This is partially because I have gone through 20 years now of climate alarmism, and I've seen none of it actually occur. I've seen thing after thing saying we're going to have no polar ice caps by this date, and all the polar bears will be extinct by this date, and this and that, and none of it has happened. None of it. Every time that you guys see a climate science thing saying how bad global warming is or climate change is, it is always they take the worst of the worst of the worst of their projections. They don't take into account any of the mitigating factors that we can do in the world. They don't take into account any of the beneficial just lucks of the world. They don't take into account any of that. They literally take the doomsdayest of doomsday scenarios in their models and give you that as what's going to happen. They don't want to tell you the most likely outcome. They want to tell you the worst outcome so that you will give them money, give them support, and they can just take more money. That's what they really want. That said, I still don't want us abusing the world. Let me make that clear. I think emissions should be curbed still. I think that we should not detriment our efforts to get new technologies, because the better we get in technology, the better we can get at removing carbon from CO2 emissions. turning it into just oxygen. Because if you can do a carbon scrubber, you can remove the carbon from it, and it doesn't hurt at all. And you can keep burning coal and gas even at that point, and it won't hurt the environment. But if you hamstring technology, it's going to take way longer to get that technology. You know what I mean? So, yeah. Making peace with the establishment is an important aspect of maturity. Oh, I disagree because the establishment isn't necessarily a good thing. I have seen establishment oppress. But maturity is understanding that sometimes you have to work with people who are not aligned with you. You can't always fight. You sometimes have to work with people. I lean towards disagree, though, because establishment has done a lot of damage. A nice short one. Astrology accurately explains many things. I disagree. It's fun to play with astrology, but I disagree with that. You cannot be moral without being religious. I strongly disagree, and this is coming from a Christian. There are definitely people who have moral cores that are sound as can be and have no religious upbringing even. Like they've never even been to a church. So I strongly disagree. I think that it is helpful to be religious in order to have a moral core. Because if you don't, at least with Christians, we're told our actions on earth are going to be judged at the pearly gates. And as such, we choose to behave in the best way we could. We act like there's always a security camera on us. The actual Christians. Not everyone that says they're a Christian is actually a Christian. Charity is better than Social Security as a means of helping the genuinely disadvantaged. I agree with that because, so here's the main thing. I think that whenever you have a charity that is meant to take care of people, they actually look at what's happening with the person and pick who needs help and who deserves help. Whenever you have Social Security coming from a government, they just write a check and send it out the door. They don't care to check. They don't care. And so with that, obviously, if we cut all Social Security today, we would have a huge issue with people not getting help. Huge issue. But eventually, the churches would restore. It used to be super common that churches had food pantries and assistants and the ability to they would run places for people to eat and sleep whenever they were homeless. They would do all that stuff. And it was awesome because people were taking care of people, not the government was taking care of people. And if you got rid of Social Security, there would be a period where people would have a really tough time. But then we would have it where people would return to actual charity and helping each other that direct way. Some people are naturally unlucky. I strongly agree with that. Some people just are naturally unlucky. I'm one of them. Anytime I do anything that involves luck, I get nothing. I haven't won a single thing in my life from any sort of raffling or competitive, or not competitive, just drawing systems. Only one. It is important that my child's school instills religious values. Okay, so I'm going to say agree because to me, religious values are being nice to each other, taking care of one another, that we're all human and all children of God. They don't have to put it in those words, but religious values, our Judeo-Christian values, they are what America was founded on. And as such, learning those religious values is huge to me because it's going to result in a better world, in my opinion. Sex outside of marriage is usually immoral. I'm going to say agree due to one specific thing. I was between agree and disagree. As a Christian, I think that sex isn't just an act. It is a bond. It is a connection. It is a spiritual connection between two people. I say it's immoral. Me and my wife, we had sex before we were married. We did. But we got super serious before we stepped into that realm. And we were committed to each other and each other only. I have never slept with a single person other than my wife. Not one. I say sex outside marriage is usually immoral, is an agree, because of the fact that there's such a hookup culture that it has made it more on the immoral side. A same-sex couple in a stable, loving relationship should not be excluded from the possibility of child adoption. I'm going to say agree on this because, okay, we all know the truth of the world is there's different types of gays. There's old school gays and there's new gays. There's old school gays are people who are very much like, hey, I just like to suck dick. It doesn't make any difference to the rest of my life past that. And they want to have a kid that they can raise because the kid needs a home or whatever the case is. Those ones are cool with me. Adopting. I think that the gay person should tell their kid the natural way of humanity continuing to exist is that we are heterosexual and that we are someone who is interested in the other sex. But there's nothing wrong with not having that way. So as long as the gay parents are that way, I'm fine with it. Because they aren't pushing what happened with them onto the kid, you know. But I have a huge issue with same-sex couples that will propagandize and push on their kid to be gay or trans or any other of these things. Unacceptable at that point. Pornography depicting consenting adults should be legal for the adult population. Strongly agree. It's up to you whether you're as a Christian. I think that there's sins, but I think that you are the one that makes the decision on whether you are going to sin or not. A big part of Christianity is the idea that you are you know. You aren't a puppet that's being wielded by your deities. You are a person who makes decisions in your life and says, oh, I should do this or I shouldn't do this. And that's all there is to it. What goes on in a private bedroom with consenting adults is no business of the state. Strongly agree with that. I just want to make it clear, though, that in a private bedroom is where my line is. Those pride parades are driving me insane because there's people committing sex acts on the street in front of children. That is exposure to a child. They should be on a list. But it's shielded because, oh, it's pride. You can't arrest gay people on pride no matter what we do. No, you should be arrested for that. You can go out in your weird outfits as long as you are in a acceptable state of dress for public. These days, openness about sex has gone too far. I agree a bit on that. Everyone has kinks. I don't kink shame. But the openness about, furry community, you guys have good and you have bad. But puppy play, horse play, the openness of it is too far. To me, personally. If you were just in adult circles talking about that stuff, I'm cool with it. But the problem is it has been bled into public where children are. And I am very firm on the idea of children should be kept pure and allowed to develop, you know? So let's see here. Where am I? Look at that. There you go, guys. There's your thing. I am just to the right of middle, and I am on the libertarian side. There you go. So now, none of you jackasses out there can say I'm far right. None of you jackasses out there can say I'm an authoritarian Nazi ever. I have now given you my chart. This is the political compass test that has been used for ages. Let's look at this really quick. So, why do they not have like the United States or any of that on there? I would love to see more countries on here. So yeah, I'm like here. Switzerland is far right? Let's look at this really quick. So I'm libertarian right, which is what I've always said. I am right-leaning libertarian. That is what I've told everyone for ages. Used to describe social attitudes. For example, describes far right. Yet its economic policies have been to the left of even French Socialist Party. Basically saying, yeah, individual topics can change. Conversely, a country may be very right-wing, i.e. libertarian, in its economics, and be very authoritarian at the same time. Singapore is a perfect example. Yeah, Saudi Arabia, you're in trouble if you do anything that they don't agree with. All right, we're at an hour already, so I need to hurry this up. Let's see what this one gives us. Oh, sweet, this is only 16 questions. If you had to choose, would you rather have small government? Which of the following statements come closest in your view? America's openness to people from all over the world is essential to who we are as a nation. If America is too open to people all over, we do risk losing our identity. Specifically, we can take 1 million people a year if they assimilate into the American way. Cool, that's fine. Or we can take 1 million people who refuse to assimilate and we lose our identity as a nation. And that identity as a nation is what has given us freedom of speech, freedom to do what we want, freedom to do these things. You guys should see the stories that are coming up in my For You news page on my phone about Muslims going to liquor stores and basically saying that they want the place closed because Muslims don't like that. And so it's America says you can do what you want. It's just like whenever the radical Christian stuff wanted prohibition. Except now we're having Prohibition 2 come from a Muslim population that has been imported that had no expectation to assimilate. In general, would you say experts who study a subject for many years are usually better at making good policy decisions about the subject than other people? Usually worse. In general, they will be better, but you cannot just assume that they are better. I have seen people who study in a topic for ages. We'll use the global warming thing that I just talked about a little bit ago. There are people who study environmental science for decades and say we're gonna fall off the cliff, and then there's people that study for ages on the other side that say, actually, it'll probably be more beneficial for us. One of these two sides is going to be wrong on the policies. Or it could be both sides are wrong and it's somewhere in the middle. Could be that as well. Because personally, I'm going to put this out there. Big thing that I'm teaching my kids is that there's your opinion, my opinion, and the truth. And we may never know the truth, but neither of us are always right. Thinking about increased trade of goods and services between the U.S. and other nations in recent decades, would you say that the U.S. has gained more than it has lost because increased trade has helped lower prices and increase the competitiveness of some U.S. businesses, or lost more than it has gained because increased trade has cost U.S. jobs in manufacturing and other industries and lower wages for some U.S. workers? I think we've lost more than we've gained because the middle class had a lot of factory workers. Like, factory workers were not minimum wage folks. You guys need to remember that. It was a lot of, like, we needed unions to push for safety stuff because sweatshops were horrible. But in the 50s, factories were doing what they could to protect people, and they were getting paid decent wages. So, yeah, I think we lost a lot and it hurt our middle class a ton. And yeah, goods went down a little bit, but I mean, you gotta, it's also taking people that would be making more money and making them make less money at the same time that stuff got cheaper, which allows them to live still. But I do think that America having the ability to do those production jobs is huge. How much more, if anything, needs to be done to ensure equal rights for all Americans, regardless of their racial or ethnic backgrounds? Nothing at all. We already have equal rights. The Civil Rights Act has said you cannot discriminate. Actually, a little bit. We need to get rid of any practices that encourage the hiring of specific individuals due to their sex, race, any of that stuff. Affirmative action, that is the admissions policies and affirmative action policies in the world are hurting people. Black students go to Ivy League schools that they aren't qualified for, which cost them an arm and a leg, get them loans at an insane rate, and then maybe they finish, and that's awesome if they do. I love that. But there's a lot of them that drop out, and then they have no job at this higher salary to pay an exorbitant student loan. And it's just a bad situation. Whereas if they didn't have those admissions policies, the black student would go to a college that is at their level. And let me say this. I'm not saying black students can't get into Harvard or Yale or any of these high up colleges because they're black. There's, like I said earlier, there's no genetic difference between all these cultures. All of us can do anything we set our minds to, but you've got to study. What I'm saying is the ones specifically that are only getting into Yale and Harvard because the ACT or SAT scores are down lower for them, those specific students are the ones I'm concerned about. And so I think that it should be a gender and race neutral thing. Nothing on the application should say whether you are male or female, black or white, Hispanic or Asian. None of it. Whoop, accidentally scrolled. So I think a little bit needs to be done in order to give fairness to everyone again. Which of the following statements comes closest to your view? Business corporations make too much profit. Most corporations make a fair and reasonable amount of profit. I think that it's the second one, because it's up to you if you are spending the money on that good. I think that anything that y'all look at and say, well, I don't have a choice, it's the only option, should be broken up. It should be competitive. States that have a single energy provider, there should be a second energy provider. That, whether you break up that one and force competition, or you allow a second one to come into the space. Either way, there should always be competition, because competition always brings down prices. I have never seen a spot where competition didn't bring down prices. How much, if at all, would it bother you to regularly hear people speak a language other than English? So it bothers me some. It's between some and a lot. And it's not because of the language. It's because they aren't trying to assimilate. At least from the view of it. Maybe they are trying to assimilate, and the person they're talking to on the phone is of another language that doesn't speak English. You know? Maybe that's the case. But for the most part, whenever I see someone in America speaking Spanish in public, especially whenever they're like at a restaurant, that's someone that just said, I'm not going to assimilate. I'm going to take advantage of the economics here, but I'm not going to try to actually join the community. And that's why it bothers me some. I think America should have an English as the official language policy, and you should not do secondary languages in any state, any situation. It should be, if you're coming here, you are going to do whatever. On a scale of 0 to 100, where 0 means you feel as cold and negative as possible, and 100 means you feel as warm and positive as possible, how do you feel towards Democrats and Republicans? Okay, so I got some stipulations on this for you Democrat folks. Because you just saw I'm right libertarian, which means I do agree with Republicans more than Democrats, especially with how wildly far left Democrats have gone. The Democrats, so let me make this clear. The Democrat Party is a 10 because the Democrat Party is fully captured by LGBT. It's fully captured by, at this point, socialism, and it is not standing with American values. I worked for a company, I worked for the government at one point back in 2020, and the Biden administration issued a prerogative that the COVID vaccine must be taken by all of its employees. I issued a request for exemption. I gave a religious exemption because I didn't want something that would hurt my body, because I am under the impression that I was given this body by God. And putting something in it that harms it is bad on my part. I drink, I do smoke cigars, but I do them in small quantities. I do not overindulge. I don't drink every day. I don't smoke every day. I take care of my body still. But this vaccine was something that, from the start, was touted as something that was touching your genetic material. It was getting your proteins to change physically. That was disturbing to me, period. So, with that, I issued a request for an exemption. I was immediately terminated. That was Democrats that did that to me. I was terminated after 3. There's personal performance. What was the A? PPAs. Personal performance analysis. I don't remember what it is. But with that, I had a whatchamacallit to it. A 3 positive PPAs. No negatives, no problems. Sorry, something distracted me for a second. Shiny. 3 positive PPAs, and then I made that request a month before I reached the end of my probationary year-long period, and I was fired immediately, basically. That was Democrats that did that. That was Democrats that went to YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and said, ban these conservative voices, ban the guy who did research on mRNA vaccines from saying anything against this vaccine. That was Democrats. It is Democrats that want trans men to compete against girls in soccer, track, swimming, cycling, all these things. It is Democrats that want my daughter to basically not get a safe space in changing rooms. It is not Republicans. It is the Democrat policy that those things happen. And so I am extremely cold towards Democrats right now. If you'd have asked me this back in the 90s and 2000s, I'd have said 40, maybe 50, you know? I'd have been much, much, much warmer to it. But in recent years, I'm told I have to call a dude that wants to be a woman a woman? No, that is forced speech. And I am not for that. As a libertarian, you cannot force me to say something. Go screw yourself. That said, on the Republican side, I'm like an 80. They do a lot of stuff that I agree with. But I have definitely disagreements with the fact that they haven't balanced the budget yet. So personally with the Epstein file stuff, I want it released. But I have this sneaking suspicion that international negotiation, trade, and relations would be destroyed by this, due to just things like the rumors that princes from the UK were in it, and I'm sure other people from other countries were in it. I personally say, screw them all. If you're being pedophilic, you're being pedophilic. I don't think it has anything to do with Trump, other than some sort of analysis in the administration saying, oh yeah, if we do this, most likely we won't be able to talk to the UK, we won't be able to talk to China, we won't be able to talk to this country, or this country, or this country, and it's going to cause insane damages. But yeah, like I said, I'm like an 80 on the Republicans, because they tend to be for freedom. They didn't want... Trump touts the vaccine and gets booed by his followers because they don't like what happened with that vaccine. They don't like that it was forced on society. They don't like that it was all this stuff. They are not a cult. They are the opposite of a cult. I see people all the time criticize Trump and Elon and RFK and Tulsi. Well, actually, Tulsi Gabbard, I haven't actually really seen any negatives on her from the right. But the point is, I see Republican voters upset about it. Well, I guess I should separate this. Yeah, it still sticks at an 80. I'm more positive. I'm like a 90 on Republican voters. Because of the fact that they're diverse. They don't all agree on one thing. It's actually a competing ideas. Whenever it comes to Democrat voters, let me clarify on them, I'd say I'm a 30. Because I do know Democrat voters that are not wild. But I also think that Democrat voters really have to look at their party, look at it and say, do I agree with abortion up to 9 months? Do I agree with all these things? And if not, you have. You have to step away from the Democrat Party and say, until you return to sanity, I'm not voting for you. I'll vote third party. I'll vote Republican. You just have to tell Democrats, you've gone too far. You are further from my values than these other groups. You don't have to vote Republican. You can vote third party. You can vote Green. You can vote Independent. But as long as Democrats consistently get the vote blue no matter who mentality, they're not going to pull back to the center at all. Republicans are constantly negotiating with Democrats. I remember since Obama was in the administration, I remember watching Republicans negotiate with Democrats in the Senate and the Congress, or in the Senate and the House, and Republicans say, no, we absolutely don't want this. And then Democrats go, we need this. And Republicans go, all right, I guess so. So yeah, they are constantly renegotiating and moving towards the center over and over and over, whether that's good or bad. But they are not a cult even in their political level, while the Democrats are. All right, we're going to try and rapid fire these because we're at almost an hour and a half. I didn't want this to go this long. Which of these statements best describes your opinion about the United States? We are above everyone. We are above everyone. If the UK wasn't arresting thousands of people for what they posted online, while allowing a UK band to celebrate the death of conservatives, I would say others as well. But Europe is going down a toilet very fast. How much of a problem, if any, would you say each of the following are in the country today? People being too easily offended by things, that's a major fucking problem. People saying things that are very offensive to others, that's not a problem. You have the right to be offended. You don't have the right to not be offended. That's my view of it. Which comes closer to your view of candidates for political office? Even if neither is exactly right, I usually feel like there's at least one candidate that shares most of my views. Yeah, my views have evolved over the years, but, There's usually at least one in at least the primary level that shares most of the views I have. And then once it reaches the general election, it's usually who's more aligned with me, even if they're not on everything. In general, how much do white people benefit from advantages in society that black people do not have? Not at all. My family, like I said earlier, 2 generations ago, had to skip meals. You make good decisions for 1 to 2 generations, and you can completely change everything about your life. You also have to save money, not spend it all. Because there's issues with every race of people that spend all their money, don't save jack, and then their kids get nothing to build off of. Do you think greater social acceptance of people who are transgender, people who identify as a gender... I think it's somewhat bad for society because of one reason. You show acceptance of it and make people think that it's good to do it. You're going to have a social contagion where people that aren't necessarily like wanting to disappear into the opposite sex, you're going to get the Lily Tinos and shit like that, where people are using it, not believing it. Blair White and Buck Angel, whatever his name is, I can't remember. I know the two of them fully, like, they want to be the opposite, and they don't want to be known as I'm trans. They just are because they are trans. That's a difference. Overall, would you say people who are convicted of crimes in this country serve? I think it's about right. In the general sense, in the majority of cases, I think it's about right. There are cases where people are given... Okay, so there's cases of people in places like New York and California that are being let out when they never should be let out. They're dangerous. And then there's a couple cases of people that are being the book thrown at them. But for the most part, in the vast majority of areas, if you are convicted of a crime, you get a fair sentencing. At least I think. This is the vibe I get. Maybe I'm wrong, and something in the future will fill my knowledge base and I can refine that, but yeah. Which of the following statements comes closest to your view? Religion should be kept separate from government policies, or government policies should support religious values and beliefs. Okay, so this wording makes it go this way. I don't think that religious stuff should be directly put into law. Sharia law is unacceptable to me. But religious values of don't steal, don't murder, those types of things should be, because they're very generic, they're very broad, it's not specific to a religion, it's values that support liberty, it's values that support your right to live. It should support religious values, but it shouldn't be that we are instituting a law that is you can only worship Christian gods. Well, Christian God. But, it shouldn't be forbidding other things, So the fact that it said values is why I went with that one. In the future, do you think U.S. policy should try to keep it so America is the only military superpower, or it would be acceptable if another country became as militarily powerful as the United States? So here's my opinion. I don't even think this is a hot take, honestly. You should have... I think that America is the best country, and thus we should be the ones that are the only military superpower. That being said, I think that we should have our wingmen out of Europe that have these Western values of freedom and justice and liberty right there behind us. I think that we should be the primary, And no one should be nearly as no one should be as powerful as us. They should be comparable, but not as powerful. We should not sell our top of the line stuff to anyone. We should protect our military, intelligence, everything as much as possible. All that stuff should be a thing. You know what I mean? I'm apparently a faith and flag conservative because I don't like LGBT. According to this, but that's probably because I have a lot of Christian belief to it, you know. 13% of registered voters are faith and flag. So I think the faith part comes into it a lot. There's faith and flag conservatives, which faith is probably the primary piece of this. Let me look at this. Faith and flag conservatives are highly religious, politically engaged, and intensely conservative when it comes to both social and economic issues. They favor a robust role for Christianity in public life and a smaller role for government and society. And they hold that a strong American military is essential in international affairs. Faith and flag conservatives are more likely to say that there is a lot of discrimination against white people in society today than they are to say the same of discrimination against black people. They overwhelmingly identify with the Republican Party and remain strong supporters of former President Donald Trump. It's not former anymore. Yeah. I do think that the discrimination against black people has been removed. I do agree with that. At this point, there's more benefit to black people than white. I'm a bit curious about these other ones. Committed. Whoop. This is horribly programmed. Okay, it's just going to flip back. Thanks. Well, I guess I can't read what the other ones are. But yeah, it's just one of those things, you know. I'm part of 10%. Outsider left is 10%. Democratic mainstays, establishment liberals, and progressive left. I have a feeling that these should be combined a bit. Because, yeah. This says I'm faith and flag conservative, which they're putting in Pew Research as the far right. Although nothing here seemed extreme. Because the only thing that sounds bad is this idea that white people are discriminated against more than black people when it's... I mean, I'm following what my eyes are telling me on that. Black people are released from prison. They're having their charges dropped against them because they're black. They have lower test scores required to enter the same schools. They have more benefits, more loans and things like that, that they are able to do. They have all that stuff. Like, they get preferential treatment in hiring practices. All that stuff. Let me take a look at this real quick. Pro-business, favor small government, support working with U.S. allies. Okay, that is pretty similar to what I said as well. It's just that I'm also faith-based because I'm a Christian. But I also am pro-business. I also favor smaller government, and I also support working with U.S. allies. Like I said, I want U.S. allies to also be strong. Populist right, critical of corporations, favor restrictive immigration policies. I'm also with all those. Fiscally conservative, yes. Socially moderate, I'm not. Well, as a libertarian, I say that you should be able to do all these things. I mean, as you guys just heard on my answers, I am socially moderate in the fact that I say, well, I don't agree with it. I do think that there shouldn't be forbidding these things. I think that being trans is a net loss, or promoting the acceptance of trans is a net loss because it's going to cause social contagion. But it is what it is. But I'm not relatively low on political engagement. I do not like that one. Disconnected from politics, financially stressed, mixed views on issues. Yeah. Outsider left, young, liberal on most issues, dissatisfied with parties. So they're far left. They're not liberal. The question is liberal referring to, I think that you should be free, or is it referring to the colloquial liberal being left-leaning? Concerned about crime. They're not concerned about crime. This is not up to date. Democratic mainstays are the people that are pushing the ideas that bail reform needs to happen and people need to be let out. Maybe if Democrat voters stopped voting for Democrats until they got good on crime, maybe then I would agree with it, but no, absolutely not. Establishment liberals, strong Biden supporters, favor political. That is a lie. Find me. All right, guys, here's your homework at the end of this. This shows exactly how bad this was. This thing lost a lot of credibility with this. Establishment liberals, show me where the Democrat Party of the long-lasting Democrats in the last, let's see here, we'll say 20 years. In the last 20 years, show me where Democrat establishment has compromised what they wanted. Find me those articles. Bring them to me. Put them down below. Because if there is actual political compromise, I will say, you're right. There's more than I realized. But I remember reading news articles all the time, and it always showed that the right came to where the left was. They fought about it for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and then the right just said, all right, we'll give you 90% of what you wanted. And then the progressive left, the wokies, highly politically engaged, deeply concerned about racial justice, and supporting strong actions to address climate change. Don't forget about political violence. There's also that. Anyways, all right. This has been a long one, an hour and a half, but I wanted to give you guys, like I said, full transparency of where I stood on things. I probably would have been in one of these two if it wasn't for the fact that I have my faith as a part of my moral core. But, it is what it is. I'm really curious how many of the Democratic mainstays would actually fit those bullet points anymore. Like I said, whenever I read those key points, their distinguishing features, I'm like, yeah, I don't think so. But yeah, with that, I'm going to end this. Thank you guys for watching this. I'm going to keep it just kind of pinned on the YouTube channel for a bit, just so that anytime anyone tries to say that I'm some radical, you can see this right here and see that my chart is far from radical. I'm not authoritarian at all, and I'm not extreme right. I'm not. And whenever I see this, it's trying to make it look like faith and flag conservatives are far right, but we're not. We're not. We think our faith drives our stuff, but we're not radical. With that, though, thank you guys for everything, and I will see you later. Bye.